All right. All right. So not unlike other architects who love to talk about what John just spoke about, about the incessant nature of talking about ourselves and our work, we're actually going to talk a little about a couple materials that aren't necessarily discussed by architects frequently: balloons and jelly.
This is our last presentation, by the way. So that was 300 slides and lasted 2 hours. This time we decided to kind of take it easy. So very few projects, and mostly things that are either edible or can float away from you. So no bricks, no sticks, none of that stuff.
Right. So the first part we'll talk about is the Artimedy showroom. There was a competition
in
Philadelphia on 2nd Street, and we sort of threw a sketch in at the last minute. The storefront's right here to the left. They produced lights, the Italian lighting company, fixtures to the right, and they kind of look like balloons, we thought. So I guess the approach was to think about it as being more or less, how do you describe the quality of light? This is our entry. That basically over time the balloons would lose air and it would be underlit and basically producing multiple effects of light conditions on the balloons falling down. So we threw this in, like I said, last second. I think it was about 2 hours of work.
Quick and easy in Photoshop.
Quick and easy, yeah, very simple. And essentially this was a sketch, this was. So what you see here is basically like a little section here looking through the storefront. Underlit lights, fixtures were not shown at all, and just balloons and the loss of air over time. And hopefully we're thinking, well, that would be great if we could produce that. What happens if we want it? How do we actually make this thing?
Right, so at the time sounded cheap and simple, but then turned out that we actually have to make it. So we took over our office and tried to kind of like make this stuff happen. It turned out that balloons are designed to either be inflated for a day or for 2 months. And we needed them for a week and a half. So we basically tried every possible. There's chemistry involved. There's all sorts of additives. That's why we call it Balloonology. And then what does this stuff look like in the window? Because it was easy to blur it in Photoshop, right? But then so anyway, so this is sort of various manifestations of our attempts to make it work. And again, it seemed easy, but turned out to be quite a disaster. At least in the making. Yeah, so anyway, and then the window cracked at some point. It almost kicked me out of my office, but
So long story short, this is kind of the inside of the making. Basically, we had a lot of balloons, multiple levels of helium as well as multiple dimensions. The balloons were all different sizes as well, so it was very much an experiment. And then we attached them with an infrastructure of fishing weights and fishing line. So what you see here is actually also in the beginning of February, so let's throw some red balloons in for fun, for balance of fun.
So it ended up looking like this, more or less, right? Which sort of we thought was reasonably close to the Photoshop image, but it took all sorts of household chemicals and, like we said, fishing weights. So basically, kind of put out just about everything in the neighborhood we could, including things like you spray in your hair for Halloween, so it glows and that kind of stuff. So it looked like that in the end.
Yeah. So we started. This is day 1 up here, and we're in. I think by day 5, it ended up somewhere in the middle on the right side, which is basically the effect we were trying to achieve. But like I said, it was endless, lots of hours, lots of frustration, lots of banging up balloons and bursting them. So.
And lots of unknown household chemicals. This is the inside, which is kind of interesting too, because this was totally a side effect, which was not really intended, because we realized at some point that on the inside of the storefront we have to keep the balloons in somehow, because they have to fly away. So we put up this curtain, which and then turned out to make it cheaply. We had to kind of use 2-foot increments, and the space was a little bit longer, so you get these cracks, and the light starts seeping through. It's kind of cool. So next project is it's kind of mind doing. This is Russia, right? And I'm from there, sort of, more or less. Right now, there's a lack of state symbol, right? They're somewhere between this imperial eagle and the Soviet sort of star. And they're physically kind of caught between those two and never really know what's going on. I'm not necessarily a graphic designer, but I attempted to try to sort of figure something out as far as state symbology goes. I'd like try to morph the two together and see what happens out of that, right, for example. And, so this is like the 3D program architects use, right? Again, like if there are any graphic designers in the audience, forgive us. We're totally out of our waters here. And then so you sort of yield stuff like this, which is kind of weird, but I think a little closer. And then the next thing what happened, which is pretty weird too, there was this London Festival of Architecture, and there are these guys there who organized a competition to make architecture out of jelly. Not jello, jelly, English jelly, very different thing. Very kind of firm. So, and we said, well, we don't really have architecture to make out of jelly, but maybe we can do edible history of Russia. So we can have black currant in 3D printed, and it's like vacuum formed, and all this stuff. And they sort of look like that, and actually quite delicious as it turned out. And so it's like another way to learn history, I guess, right? You can kind of take it in gastronomically. And, you know, I don't know, people tried it, they said they got into it. So anyway, and there was this kind of big party, and then it turned out that we're also one of the 10 finalists, and the finalists, as it turned out, most of the kind of famous architects in England entered. So we have, you know, Sir Norman Foster, Sir Richard Rogers, and Sir Nicholas Grimshaw, and then on the right we have Jason Austin and Alex Mergold, and that's Sir we're like any time now. So that was sort of, that was the jelly thing. And then the final thing actually was published in Domus magazine. And so there's the jelly thing, but then I got the thing in the mail. I'm like, wait a minute, there's the balloons on the cover too. So it's like somehow the sort of Balloonology, even though it's not ours, and jelly making kind of came together in this sort of really strange thing via the Italian magazine Domus, right? And there's like stuff in Italian about what they just told me about.
Yeah, so now, and completing the transition into a nice, clean transition is final siding and suburbanism.
Another product nobody wants to deal with, right?
And what we've actually, we're basically coming up with this idea, or gave this idea about combining suburbanism with ruralism, or sorrel as we call it. And as a result, what happens is we've done this is our first sort of installation, looking at vinyl siding and its potentials, and what it can actually do, twist in an interior environment, rather than necessarily an exterior environment.
And it lights up nicely too, as it turned out.
Yeah, it turned out that it actually glowed. Who would have thought? So, what we actually are, I mean, our current installation is not this one, but we're actually at Pentimenti Gallery in Old City on North 2nd Street. So there's one installation there, please check it out.
That's it.
Look into it.